and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
And this is Season 3 of the Wrestling at Random podcast, where we dump all of the pro wrestling content all over the internet into the randomizer. And we fire up the randomizer. It picks a show for us to watch at random, anytime, any place, weekly TV, any big shows. And we've been all over the place in the first 2.5 seasons at this point of the podcast. And we're going to a show we've seen a couple times already on the podcast.
Well, a wrestling television show. Not this particular episode. We're not so many seasons into Wrestling at Random that we are reviewing shows that we already reviewed in a previous season. We're probably 70 or 80 seasons away from that. But yes, this pro wrestling television show, one of the longest running, some would say the longest running episodic television show in the history of the medium. That is in fact false, but it's been around for a long time nonetheless.
Yes, WWF Monday Night Raw. And if you want to hear our breakdown of the history of Raw, how did Raw happen, the evolution from primetime wrestling to Monday Night Raw, we covered all that. Go back to the first Monday Night Raw episode we reviewed for this podcast. We open up that show talking about the history of Raw. So go back.
By the way, you mentioned it briefly, but go back and listen to our primetime wrestling episode in season 2 as well, because as you said, that's where Monday Night Raw came out of, and we get into that history there as well.
That's right. So we will, so I highly recommend going back. Even if you only want to listen to the first few minutes, I dare you to turn it off after, though. It's such good stuff. But go give it a shot. Listen to those history segments. It'll catch you up on how we got to WWF Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw, this episode, if you're looking for it in a streaming service, can be found. The episode aired May 2nd, 1994.
Wow, 1 day shy of my 13th birthday.
However, the show was, this is a taped show. It was not live. So it was actually recorded in April 26th. So the show opens with a recap of last week's Raw.
It does. We roll straight into this. There's no show open to start the show. We just start off, and at first it's a bit jarring because it feels like this is just this episode starting, but there's a small graphic that says last week on Monday Night Raw. And when you turn on Raw, the first thing you expect to see in 1994, I guess it's Captain Lou Albano.
Captain Lou Albano. So he's ranting about the Headshrinkers getting a tag title shot against the Quebecers.
Ranting is the right word here. He is in full Louis Albano mode here as late as 1994.
And then Johnny Polo comes out. You would know Johnny Polo as future incarnations of Scotty Flamingo and Raven.
Yeah, this is in between, because we had Scotty Flamingo in WCW in like 91 into 92, definitely in 92, and then he's here as Johnny Polo, who he was never a wrestler at this point in the WWF, which is so weird to look back at and think about. He was a manager, he was a color commentator, and then he would go on really just a little over a year after this to be Raven in ECW. And my God, could you not have more different characters? But here he is, Johnny Polo, the manager of the Quebecers. And before he can do much of anything, he gets in Lou Albano's face. And what happens? Color commentator Randy Savage grabs the future Raven, Johnny Polo, and Lou Albano punches him. So just think about that here. Lou Albano is punching Raven while Raven is being held by Randy Savage on WWF television in 1994. This feels like a Mad Lib or a drug-induced hallucination. It is instead Monday Night Raw in May of 1994.
I was trying to look up why the heck Lou Albano returned, why he was here, why he was part of this, other than the storyline explanation that we get that Afa, the manager of the Headshrinkers, wanted Lou Albano there because he was the manager for Afa and Sika when they won, as Samoans won the tag team titles. And
Yeah.
I couldn't find any other reason than they wanted him just for this storyline.
It's weird too. Right away when this show starts, and again, we're only in the recap of the previous week's episode, but as we go along, it's a really strange period in the WWF where, as we talked about just before we started recording, Hulk Hogan has just left. He has just signed with WCW. He has not yet debuted in terms of a match, but he is in the fold in WCW. And Vince is clearly in this weird mindset, which is pretty rare for the WWF and for Vince McMahon, but of really referencing the past. We have Lou Albano on the show. We have Afa on this show. We get a lot of historical references, including the Moondogs from Vince McMahon on this show. It's very strange, very different, a weird sliver of time here in the history of the company.
Yes, super weird to hear Vince talking about the history and like going back like 20 plus years at this point, to talk about the history of the tag team championship. It was that was pretty jarring. It was also jarring as we cut to the open, which is just like a saxophone playing some tunes.
Oh, it's the best. It's the iconic original Monday Night Raw opening. I had all caps saxophone love as well here. The intro plays. We hear that music, the sweet dulcet tones of the saxophone. And then I had forgotten how absolutely freaking annoying it was that for the entire ringside intro of the show with Vince McMahon and Randy Savage, this siren will not stop. They are previewing the show, going match by match what we're going to see, and then all you are hearing is the siren blaring into your ears. This is not made to listen to and to watch while if you're watching via Roku and you have your earbuds plugged into your remote. Not good. This is very very unsettling.
My notes also say annoying siren in all caps, because that is all. It was just on all the time.
You know what's not annoying
unbearable.
though? This building here in Burlington, Vermont, which again, it's so random as to when they have their time periods in the WWF where they will refer to smaller towns or not. But I love the look of this building. It in some ways looks like a bigger Corrigan Hall almost. There aren't too many venues in the United States that give off that vibe of the legendary mid-sized building in Japan, Corrigan Hall. But this one kind of has that feel to it. Very cool look, and it immediately took me back to really liking in the early days of Monday Night Raw when the show was in smaller sort of theater type buildings. It definitely gave it a different feel and vibe than the the marathon TV tapings they did back then for Superstars or Challenge or whatever else.
Yeah, this was a better look than the random nightclubs for Shotgun Saturday Night.
Yes.
You can go back to season 2 in our recap of Shotgun Saturday Night from a random nightclub in New York City.
Oh, what an episode that was, by the way. But a great podcast. I highly recommend people go check that out. I think that was one of the hidden gems of season 2. But without any further ado, the siren is interrupted by the theme song of the Quebecers, which is basically Jacques Rougeau singing over and over again, "We're not the Mounties," even though they are in fact dressed like as two Mounties versions of the Mountie.
One other note about the building in, like you mentioned, Burlington, Vermont. This is
it's a coat factory.
It's a sold out show.
It looks it.
2,500 fans selling out this building.
Well, there you go. I was right on my slightly bigger Cork and Hall vibe as well, because that's sellout there is about 1,700. So yeah, a little bit bigger.
So the WWF Tag Team Championship, the champions, the Quebecers, make their way out as you described. They've got
they
Johnny
come out
Polo
first,
with them. Yes,
as the champions.
Their opponents: Samu, Fatu, the Headshrinkers, who we've reviewed many of their matches before as the Samoan SWAT team, the
Yes.
SST,
We've talked
back
about
in the NWA.
Their great, intimidating ring entrance, how they are top tier squash match guys killing jobbers. Here, they are beloved baby faces, which is strange, and they have two managers. It is a tag team of two men managed by two men, as we mentioned, Lou Albano and Afa. And yeah, I'll have a lot of thoughts as we go along about the presentation of the Headshrinkers here in this match, because I have some parallels to other teams that we've recently talked about from WWF television or WWF pay-per-views that came from elsewhere, and then the difference in terms of how they're presented here.
Yeah, the first thing I missed was not hearing the Halloween theme song as they make their way out. That was great. And them being intimidating, menacing, crazy guys that do amazing squash matches, like right up there on the Mount Rushmore of squash matches with like Sid Vicious and these guys. So, but this was not the vibe. They were baby faces. They were not intimidating. They were here. They looked focused and ready for a tag team title match.
I'll just get it out of the way right now. This reminds me, and we'll talk about it as we go through the match, so much of the presentation of the Legion of Doom
100%.
in the WWF as compared to the Road Warriors in the NWA or elsewhere. They just, and it's a good match, but they are a babyface tag team that sells, makes comebacks. Like, there's nothing that you could say other than the fact that they're slightly bigger and maybe not as quick, and they're more than slightly bigger, but they're basically the Rockers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, every babyface tag team it had to wrestle the same style. It's really weird to see them here this way. But anyway, let's get to the match itself, because Pierre and Fatu, the larger men from each team, start. And man, for two big guys, they are moving. Pierre is flying as they crisscross off the ropes.
We should mention, for those folks who aren't aware of Pierre of the Quebecers, Pierre Carl Oulet, PCO, as he would affectionately be known.
Also, Jean-Pierre Lafitte, his short-lived pirate gimmick, just about a year later, or maybe even later this year, in 1994 and in 1995 in the WWF. A relatively uninteresting run for him at that character, other than having great match with Bret Hart, right around the same time that Bret had the series of matches with Hakushi. We should also note, fun trivia fact, a lot of people probably don't remember this, I barely remember it, that a couple of years later, it's at 1997, 1998, right around there, the Quebecers would resurface in WCW as the Amazing French Canadians.
They did.
A lower mid-card tag team that was mostly cannon fodder, just above jobber level, but just kind of weird to think that was just a few years after this.
Yeah, Pierre gets taken down with a shoulder block and a headbutt, and the first thing that I notice just from these series of moves is how hard this ring is. There is no give whatsoever to this ring. It looks like cement.
Yeah, we are still firmly entrenched in the concrete ring. Not actually, but it might as well be a concrete ring. It is. Yeah, it's right up there with as noticeable as the actual ropes. And when you see big guys moving fast and hitting the ropes, you're always terrified that disaster awaits.
But especially if you watching more modern wrestling and you see the give in the ring, to see this and not move an inch is just like, wow. Yeah, that it's amazing that anybody's body wasn't destroyed in this era.
You have more of an understanding as well as to why guys really took it easy on house shows.
Yep.
Because, man, like if you're wrestling 5-6 times a week in that ring, I'm going to try to find every way possible to have a no bumps match every night.
Samu gets in with Jock. He headbutt, he goes for a cover, and then Pierre comes off the top and hits Jock accidentally. That's going to be the story of this match here, is miscues from the Quebecers.
Yes, faux pas from the French Canadians here, and this is the first one. We then get a double noggin knocker, as you have to check that off the box here, still in 1994 in a tag team match. Jacques gets clotheslined over the top rope, and Randy Savage on commentary calls it a topsy-turvy. Randy Savage is completely different from Dusty Rhodes on commentary, and also exactly the same in some ways. We should mention it is Vince McMahon and Randy Savage that's the only two men here in the broadcast booth, which is crazy when you think about just a few years later, Savage being gone shortly after this, really, and then the however this played out, Oliver knows, I guess, but whatever happened between Randy Savage and Vince McMahon, the bitterness there, it's so weird on this show to see them just palling around and best buds and like the legitimate joy that Vince McMahon seems to have sitting next to Randy Savage. Talk about another sliver in time. That's the case here.
No, and having Savage on commentary, I'm just like, I'm having Ric Flair as Triple H's manager in 2003 vibes. I'm like,
absolutely,
get this man in the ring. Why is he sitting at ringside? Why is he not wrestling?
He's exponentially better than everyone else on this show. And for that matter, you talk about seeing Ric Flair at ringside in 2003, managing Triple H. I'm having that same feeling, even though I know he's not Ric Flair, watching the future Raven Johnny Polo relegated to being a manager for the not the Mounties, the Quebecers.
Yeah, I mean, just 1 year later, Savage is the WCW champion, and we reviewed his match with Tenzan at Starrcade 95. That's waiting for you in the bonus content. If you sign up for our bonus feed, you can hear us review that. But it's funny to think that that's just a year from now, and Savage is relegated to commentary duty here.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, think even earlier in 95, Savage and Flair, that feud in the summer of 95 that popped several buy rates and, really kind of set the table for a lot of what was to come in WCW. Yeah, it's weird to see him relegated, as you said, to a color commentary position here. I did enjoy, as we move along in this match, we get a USA chant.
We do.
Here, and Randy Savage is amazing, deadpan saying, obviously that chant is for American Samoa.
Yes. Which I made the same joke in my head. I'm like, America Samoa, and Savage being again the voice of the people.
Playing the role of Jesse Ventura here. Before that, though, after we talked about the topsy-turvy sending Jacques over the top rope, the Quebecers and Johnny Polo retreat to the dressing room, essentially to get counted out and retain their tag team titles. Vince is great here, just totally indignant, screaming, this is a ripoff. And then we get an on-the-fly rules change here in 1994 as referee Earl Hebner informs Howard Finkel that if the Quebecers do not come back to the ring and are counted out, they will lose the tag team championship.
Yeah, I had a lot of questions about referee Earl Hebner's authority to do this here. He gets to take away the champion's advantage without clearing it with anybody. I don't know about that.
Jack Tunney give him power of attorney.
Yeah, or was Gorilla Monsoon? Was Gorilla Monsoon the president at the time? Yeah. I was angry. I was like, okay, all right, I'll let that slide. But you're tread lightly here, WWF 1994. So yeah, as soon as that announcement's made, they come running back from the back, and we go to commercial.
Well, they come running back, but then they roll back out to break the count, and Randy Savage yells at the top of his lungs, "Smart cookies!" He is so bad and so good at the same time on commentary.
After commercial, the Headshrinkers are working over Pierre, double teams by the Headshrinkers.
They're working him over, just working the arm like a random babyface team. This is where I got irate on my couch and wrote, this is exactly like Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, just putting holds on. Like, this is a feud. The Quebecers have ducked the Headshrinkers for weeks, if not months. They just tried to duck out of this match, and then the Savage Headshrinkers, their retort to that is to put on an arm ringer.
Fatu sent off the ropes. Jacques from the outside buries a knee to the back of Fatu as he was hitting the ropes. Pierre hits a clothesline, and Fatu does a full flip off that clothesline. They then beat up Fatu on the outside. Back in the ring, we get more double teaming by the Quebecers.
That back heel trip running clothesline combo, almost like a total elimination. This is where I write that, man, the Quebecers are actually kind of awesome, better than I remember.
Yeah, I mean, Pierre was
Oh,
way more impressive than I remember at all. Like I didn't watch any. I was this is I was
your
dark.
dark period.
I was dark to pro wrestling at this point, so I did not see any WWF 1994. So my exposure to Pierre was all those other gimmicks we talked about at the top of the show. So seeing him here, no, rock solid and a good team here with Jock.
I remember really liking Pierre in the Jean-Pierre Lafitte gimmick. Not as much of the gimmick, but the just seeing him as a single and being the the bigger guy that just did crazy high flying stuff from time to time, but not thinking much of him in the Quebecers, not thinking much of the team. But yeah, no, they were fun here.
Pierre gets backdropped by Jock onto Fatu for another 2 count.
I love that was a lot of their offense was Jacques just slamming his
Pierre.
partner, his rotund but athletic partner onto his opponent.
After another commercial, we see Fatu backdropping Pierre over the top to the outside. Jock quickly, he's quickly thinking, he puts his partner right back in, but Fatu gets to make the hot tag, and Samu comes in, runs wild.
He runs wild, but in the middle of running wild, the camera pans over to Vince McMahon and Randy Savage so we can see them calling the match, but we can't see the match in the middle of this hot tag and comeback. Really weird.
Samu leaps at Jock, but Jock drops down, and Samu goes over the top and gets his head stuck in the ropes, hanging himself between the top and middle rope.
This is terrifying because this is the same calendar year, if I'm not mistaken, that Mick Foley, Cactus Jack,
doing
lost
the same
his
thing.
ear doing this exact same spot in a match against Vader in Germany. I don't want to see this. It's crazy and it looks cool, but knowing what could happen, just get your arms tied up in the ropes like your Iron Mike Sharp instead.
Jacques holds Samu in a pile driver position for a while and then hits a delayed pile driver.
This was awesome. He's struggling to lift him up. He's making Jacques Rougeau faces, and he finally gets it. I love this.
They go for their finishing move, where Pierre does a flip off the top, holding while Jacques is like holding his hands and keep like bracing his arms up, so he gets full extension on the flip over.
It's a much better version of Public Enemy's drive-by. It's the same move, but they get much higher in the air, and Pierre is a much better athlete than Rocco Rock. It looks like it would not be fun to take, but taking does not happen here.
No, Samu moves out of the way. On the outside, Albano pulls Johnny Polo off the apron, and Afa hits Polo. The ref...
That's a downgrade, by the way. If you are Johnny Polo at this point, you've got to be wondering how long you are for the world of the WWF. Last week, you get held by Randy Savage as Lou Albano hits you, and then here you get held by Lou Albano as Afa hits you.
The ref didn't see the Headshrinkers tag, so Jock goes for a double team, but accidentally hits his partner Pierre with a forearm. Again, another miscue. Pierre then hits Jacques out of anger.
Yes, on purpose. Hits Jacques, but then Pierre gets knocked to the floor. Vince says, "What a stupid thing to do," and he is correct in his analysis. Fatu then tags in, and they hit a move that can only be described as a double stroke.
That's exactly what it was.
Two Jeff Jarrett's were in the ring, but it's the Headshrinkers.
They knock Pierre off the apron. Fatu goes up to the top, hits the huge splash off the top, gets the 3 count. New WWF Tag Team Champions, the Headshrinkers, and the crowd is into this title change. Oh, yeah. We even get a little dusting of indoor fireworks as well. Yes. So quite the atmosphere in the smaller building here for the Headshrinkers victory.
Yeah, the people are going crazy. Lou Albano is going out of his mind. Part of this story was that Lou was going for, I think it was either his 10th tag team championship reign as a manager or the 10th different team that he had guided. And it had been many, many years between title reigns for Lou as a manager. We should also note at this point, this is still in the era of title changes being rare and TV title changes, meaning title changes happening on a television show, on a weekly show, being even more rare. So the people are fired up for this. It was a really fun tag match. I wouldn't say it was great, but it was a very good tag match by TV Sanders in 1994. And as odd as it was to see the Headshrinkers in this sort of role, and it's definitely not, I think, how either you or I would prefer to see them presented. They did a great job, particularly Fatu as a babyface here. You could see the seeds of Fatu being a successful singles babyface going forward, just based off of his performance in this match. Samu, I don't know if it's just sort of his resting facial expression or what, but there was nothing that he did that made him come off like a real babyface here.
No, and you got some real vibes of him being the Marty Jannetty of this team.
Yes, while Fatu was making a difference here, you could say.
That's right, and that would be just 1 year later. He would be a single star here in 1995. You can hear us talk about that in episode 1, season 1.
Match 1 of episode 1, season 1, the In Your House episode where he wrestles a young Triple H Hunter Hearst Helmsley. We should also note, by the way, that just keep track if you're listening and you're following along, or maybe you've already watched this show when you saw us announce that this is what we're going to be reviewing on the podcast this week. This is the opening match on this show. Tag Team Championship, a title change. One would wonder,
where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? This has got to be a crazy episode of Raw. We already had a title change. Where do we go from here? Well, immediately where we go from here is promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Yes, the sweet dulcet tones of Lord Al Hayes.
Yeah, I guess finally after 5 years, he was able to pull himself away from the Beermeister, from the Oktoberfest. He survived the food fight with Mean Gene Okerlund. And then, what is the commercial for? Ico Pro. Who is the pitch man? Lex Luger.
That's right. Luger's working out. Yeah.
In full WBF era Lex Luger form here, working out, saying, Ico Pro, you gotta want it. Talk about a time capsule. We talk about slivers of time. Ico Pro, there's Ico Pro banners all over the arena. This is something else.
We then get a King of the Ring report with Todd Pettengill. This is like a event center style.
Yes, we get very regal music to open this. We get the King of the Ring report graphic, and then we see Todd Pettengill looking very casual and comfy in his white t-shirt and black satin jacket.
He tells us qualifying matches are happening to get into the King of the Ring tournament.
He explains the concept of a tournament if we are all morons.
So these qualifying matches that are advertised, Scott Steiner versus IRS.
Wrong. It is Scott Steiner versus the Taxman IRS. As if they had already not browbeaten us over the head with the concept of Erwin R. Shyster as a rogue IRS agent. He's referred to here by Todd Pettengill as the Taxman IRS. That will be a qualifier this weekend on Superstars. Next week on Raw, we have an even bigger qualifying match.
Razor Ramon, the now former Intercontinental Champion, losing that title to Diesel, who we will see later. Razor Ramon takes on Quang.
Quang the Ninja, who would go on a year later to be Savio Vega, but here he was a
martial arts expert. Quang.
Yeah, this was right. This is basically on the level of Chris Champion as Yoshi Kwan.
This is their answer to Yoshi Kwan.
I'd like to think so. I just think it's a shame that Kenny Omega didn't ape this look like he did for Yoshi Kwan.
We're told that Art Donovan will be the guest analyst, and I'm pretty sure that went down as one of the worst performances in wrestling history.
Absolutely.
It's the stuff of legend is how bad Art Donovan was And I don't know if it was this show specifically, but I know
Oh, it
that
was.
Was it this one? Because
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, this is one of those things where
it's the stuff of legend. How bad
it's
it
the
was.
stuff of legend. It's the stuff of infamy. It's the stuff where it's so bad that you forget about it, but then the second it gets brought up, it all comes flooding back to you, and you remember, yeah, that was horrible.
Yeah, so I who have not seen that King of the Ring, know about how horrible our Donovan's performance was. And as soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's the one that was so bad and one of the worst performances ever. So yeah, that was funny to hear. Back at ringside, Chief J Strongbow.
Keeping with the retro vibe here.
Yes, bringing out their legends as WWF was doing at this point.
And not embarrassing them. Think of more modern times, and really when I say modern, I mean like at least the last 20 years, where usually, unless it's an absolute top legend, anybody that's brought back is just brought back to be humiliated and embarrassed and sent on their way. Here in 1994, we've had Alpha, we've had Lou Albano, and we now have Chief J Strongbow, and they're all presented as important characters and treated with respect. It's really strange.
Strongbow says that Tatanka is on the warpath, and he says it in the least angry and least charismatic way possible.
Oh yes, this did not come across as warpathy at all. This is something. Then Tatanka comes to the ring. His opponent is a hilariously pathetic looking jobber named Derek Domino.
Yes.
And I referenced that because we've talked about before how much we love hilariously pathetic looking jobbers. However, this match, if the idea was to present Tatanka as a threat, this is a foul. This match goes on and on and on. Derek Domino gets offense in this match, and a considerable amount of it.
Yeah, So at first it started with Domino trying a sleeper and getting dropped on his head, trying to chop, and Tatanka no sells and beats him down. And then at this point, IRS phones in.
Literally phones in. I don't know what figuratively would be, but literally phones in here. He is on the telephone line with the announcers. This is another thing I forgot that WWF used to do around this time. They would have wrestlers on the quote unquote telephone. This was something, again, it's IRS leaning heavily on his gimmick. He says that Tatanka owed a gift tax on his Native American headdress, and that is why IRS destroyed it, because Tatanka did not pay the gift tax.
Which I do not believe is how the IRS actually works.
But it might be how the taxman IRS works.
That makes more sense.
This does not feel like the optimal way to build an athletic competition between two men, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so Tatanka, he slams the guy, he drops an elbow, and at this point, I'm like, this squash match is hideously boring.
And it's going on for a long time. Like you said, all those things happen. We get multiple arm ringers, a leg drop onto the arm, an arm bar. At this point, Vince McMahon is so bored that he starts talking to Randy Savage about all the media that Randy Savage did earlier this afternoon in Baltimore for the King of the Ring. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, and then Domino starts getting offense in. He fights back, hits a clothesline,
gets a nice left hand, some clubbing forearms. He's got a legitimate advantage like 8 minutes into this match here on this 1 hour television show.
Tatanka then starts firing up, and now Domino's shots no longer have an effect. He hits a chop to the head a couple times. His finisher is a Samoan drop, which is weird, and he gets a 3 count. This was lame.
It was lame in terms of the actual match, having to watch it. And then in kayfabe, like I said earlier, all I'm thinking as we go through this, and by the time we get to the end of this, is I don't think Tatanka can handle any higher challengers than Derek Domino. He is totally in over his head here with the taxman IRS.
Todd Pettengill recaps the dates for the upcoming WrestleMania 10 Revenge Tour.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had gone to May 22nd in Chicago, Illinois, but you answered that earlier. You were out of pocket for wrestling at this point. How about the catchphrase for this tour? Todd Pettengill says, direct quote, "Catch the glamour and the spectacle of the WrestleMania Revenge Tour."
Yeah, if there's one thing I couldn't imagine, that's the Rosemont Horizon in 1994. Sounds even worse than today. We are not fans of the Allstate Arena, the building that WWF was running at these times here in our native Chicago. After commercial, Jerry the King Lawler is in the ring to host his interview segment, The King's Court. He runs down Rowdy Roddy Piper.
He calls him an ancient relic, which is funny, and I'm sure this is exactly what he was going for. He's calling Piper an ancient relic.
And it has been. Yeah.
And Lawler's no younger and in exactly the same stage of the career, if not further away from being a top star.
Yeah, so this is building up Piper's big return to the WWF and his feud with Jerry Lawler. They were actually hoping would help carry the buy rate for the King of the Ring show that they were describing.
Which is hilarious given that just a year or under a year later, all we'd see on WWF television over and over again would be those, the skits with the fake Gene Okerlund and
the Nacho Man and the Huckster.
Nacho Man and the Huckster. And yet here they were leaning on their history and older wrestlers and performers as hard as you possibly could.
Lawler's guest this week is the new Intercontinental Champion, Diesel, Kevin Nash. So he comes out. First
off, he comes out. We need to talk about his entrance. He comes out. There's a silhouette in this very basic entranceway that's supposed to make you think that there is a diesel-powered truck, a big rig.
All you see are the headlights. Yeah, you only see the headlights behind him.
Yeah, you see the headlights, bathed otherwise just in black. And then his music, my take here from 1994 Raw is that the music was chosen and developed by a toddler because it's just loud sounds from big cars. You have the siren earlier from an ambulance, and then here the music, if you can call it that for Diesel, it's just idling truck sounds and a blaring truck horn over and over and over again.
Horrible, absolutely horrible. Lawler tries to call him by his nickname. He's like, "Can I call you Daddy Cool or whatever?"
He says, "Can I call you Cool Daddy?"
Cool Daddy, that was it.
Diesel says, "You can just call me Big Daddy Cool."
Big Daddy Cool.
Yes, this is the origin story of that nickname.
So they explain that Shawn Michaels is not there. They tried to play up an injury angle because he sacrificed himself in the Intercontinental title match. Shawn was no-showing a bunch of shows at this point in time.
Shocking.
So an
isolated incident, if there ever was one.
No, definitely not.
Shawn Michaels being difficult,
including the entire Japanese tour that followed this. The week after this show, they went on a tour of Japan that Shawn Michaels also no-showed. So so again, no Shawn on this show here, playing up an injury angle. We see a little clip of him getting knocked off the apron to the floor.
Okay, I have to jump in because I've been holding this in the whole time. I was waiting for you to say it, but you are bearing the lead here. Diesel, Kevin Nash, is a horrible promo here. Oh my God.
It's not horrible.
He's beyond horrible.
No.
All-time terrible.
We saw Vinny Vegas on that Clash of the Champions. That was horrible.
This is every bit as bad. He sounds, whatever this accent is that he's going for, he's half Vinny Vegas, half Brooklyn Brawler.
Okay, that is bad. That is
terrible, poorly written lines that he can barely deliver. He does not sound convincing or natural at all. This is an awful performance from him, stepping out of the shadow of Shawn Michaels here. and becoming a big time single star, challenging Bret Hart in this promo. He is terrible here. It's amazing when you just a few years later, like a year and a half later, he is this effortlessly cool, legitimately, great promo sort of guy that just exudes confidence and just natural speaking. And there is none of that here.
No, definitely. No, he is still, it feels like light years away from where he would be.
He would have been better off as Oz with Kevin Sullivan screaming "Welcome to Oz" over and over again than he was here trying to talk his way through this. Jerry Lawler did his best to guide him through this and make it work, but there was nothing about this other than the fact of the guy's height that would make you think top guy if you were just parachuting in and saw this promo.
Yeah, he says they'll be back together like Batman and Robin, and he's going after Bret Hart's WWF World Championship, and I believe that he got that title shot at that King of the Ring show.
I know it came pretty soon because he had a couple title shots. I know they had a title match, I believe, at a Royal Rumble, which ended in a no contest, but was an awesome match. I thought in that Bret Hart went full heel mid-match, even though he was a baby face. It was a face versus face match. This obviously would have been face versus heel. But yeah, I believe that was at King of the Ring.
After commercial, we get random people talking about random Undertaker sightings, including like kids saying that they saw the Undertaker going down the slide, which made me howl with laughter, picturing 1994 Dead Man Undertaker at a playground with a bunch of little kids, and he's waiting for his turn to go down the slide, and then he gets to the top and goes down the little kid slide, and this was completely ridiculous.
That would not have been any more or less lame than what we saw here. Yeah, we're at the broadcast table, and Vince McMahon says people around the world are claiming they've seen the Undertaker. I guess as if he's a Bigfoot or the Loch Ness monster. We go to a car shop, a firehouse, a jewelry store, a school, and they all say they saw the Undertaker. So lame.
Yokozuna with Mr. Fuji and Jim Cornette.
Another act with two managers.
And they're taking on, only Yokozuna is taking on two dudes in a handicap match.
Yeah, two dudes in a handicap match, which it takes a while for them to tell us who they are.
At this point, we don't know who they are. They're just two unnamed dudes.
But I write in my notes right away, I think the jobber in blue is Scott Taylor, who would go on to be Scotty 2 Hotty, and it is. I was very upset that I recognized him because we've talked about before. There's some things that I feel like if you're living a successful / balanced life, you shouldn't remember in wrestling, and I remembered this, so I guess maybe I need to rethink how balanced and successful my life is.
I did not recognize Scotty 2 Hotty at this point.
Good for you.
He Yoko clotheslines both men, drops a giant leg on one of them, just crushing him.
As if there's another choice for Yokozuna than to drop a giant leg here. He
ridiculous.
Is massive. Vince McMahon says 2/3 of Americans are overweight, but Yokozuna chooses to be overweight.
He hits a Uranagi on the other guy. He throws one over the table. He's slapping around the other guy. And this is when we're told they are Mike Davis and Scott Taylor.
Yes. So there we go. Yokozuna. This is what I wanted to see out of the Headshrinkers. This is from Yokozuna.
This was a squash.
Yes, a squash and a squash.
Ooh, pun intended. Yeah. Wait.
Prejudice. He's toying with these guys before he puts them away. It is glorious. I could watch Yokozuna do this every week on television.
No, this was super fun. Belly to back suplex on Taylor. Yoko then slams Taylor on top of Davis, so they're laying on top of each other. Yokozuna then to the middle rope, hits the bonsai drop onto both, which is...
If you're wondering, it is a second rope northern exposure. That is what a bonsai drop is. A super northern exposure. Excalibur would call it an avalanche northern exposure, and I am here for it. Sadly, it did not appear as though Scott Taylor and Mike Davis were going to be long for the world after taking this first one, and their evenings are sadly for them not yet done.
No, the 3 count, Yoko gets the win, but then he hits another bonsai drop on Davis, and he just keeps sitting on him.
We get this extreme close-up of Davis under the humanity that is Yokozuna, grunting and groaning, and he can't get out. Yokozuna finally gets off of him, goes to Scott Taylor, and hits the second bonsai drop / super northern exposure on him. Just total carnage here.
And speaking of northern exposures, Earthquake comes out to make the save for these two geeks.
Yes, the former Canadian Earthquake, now just Earthquake.
And Yokozuna bails out of the ring, running away from Earthquake. This was a great squash match, and I wanted Tatanka to have to come out here to watch this.
Yes.
And with Chief J Strongbow just standing over him, disappointed. That's what I want. Not saying
a word, just looking at him disapprovingly.
Yeah, because this is how it's done.
What we learned is that Derek Domino was much higher on the pecking order than the future Scotty Tuhati in 1994.
After commercial, Vince interviews the Earthquake, who basically challenges Yokozuna to a match.
I love, by the way, the irony here in that Yokozuna, John Tenta, a legitimate former high-level sumo, which we referenced way back in that All Japan 1985 or 86 TV episode.
The young John Tenta.
Yes, when they were first bringing him in, like a full year before his first match, when he was sort of being introduced to the fans and the world of pro wrestling. Here, some 8 years later, he's standing off with a guy called Yokozuna, and they're about to have a wrestling match.
They not only, as part of their feud, had a wrestling match, but they also had a sumo match as part of their feud as well. Vince and Savage then do a short recap, and then they do this like high five where they're like holding hands after a high five, like they're going to do a freeze frame at the end of an 80s sitcom. Yes. And that's it.
This felt like Rocky and Apollo Creed at the end of the run on the beach or something. But instead, that's the end of the show. And you talk about takeaways, mentioned it earlier. One of my takeaways was just the genuine fondness that Vince McMahon and Randy Savage had for each other at this point. It's so weird in retrospect to look back and see that, knowing the direction their relationship went. And yes, before we go off the air, we get the hard sell for next week's show, which once again, the only thing announced for it is Razor Ramon versus Quang the Ninja in a King of the Ring qualifying match. So that's that. My take on this, if you're listening to this show in real time as we record this in late 2021, is that the formatting of this episode of Raw felt like an episode of AEW Rampage.
Except Rampage would never end with just a random squash after having a tag title match at some point in the show.
But Rampage usually would have the opener is really the true main event, and then we sort of tail off in importance because it's on so late that by the end you have really the least important match. Because that's when they think most people are going to be asleep. This it felt much more like that, or like a Saturday night's main event layout than what you would expect from a Monday Night Raw show. I'd be interested also to go back. My memories from this time period are a little bit hazy of Raw, and see if this was the normal format or if this was sort of an aberration.
Yeah, because you're in this weird time period too, where you still didn't have a lot of competitive matches on TV here. No. So it was very squash heavy, and it wouldn't be until really the formation of WCW Monday Nitro completely changed the format where everything was a competitive match. This was not the format here, and so I'm curious if they front load the competitive match and then just peter out with squashes, or if this was just a weird format and the main event would have gone on last. I don't know. I don't know what the format was, but this show feels weird in its format because
Sure.
it does feel like the Saturday night's main event just kind of petering out at the end. But then they would always bring back even like at the very end, they'd bring back whoever the champion was to do a promo or something, right?
Well, I guess Vince and Savage high-fiving is the closest.
Yeah, like we didn't close with like a Bret Hart thing, or we didn't even close with like the Headshrinkers celebrating their titles or anything. Like, we didn't get anything to like kind of tie this off. It just kind of fades out, and
it felt like an episode of Superstars in reverse.
Yes, that's exactly right. So the show ended up doing a 2.9 rating, and it was totally fine. This was.
I don't know that I would call this totally fine.
This was
the tag match was a fun TV match, and it's cool to see a title change during.
We got a title change and a fun TV match, exactly.
The rest of this show
and Yokozuna's squash was great.
It was fun for what it was. This show outside of the opener, completely unnecessary in terms of its existence.
So much filler. So like we talk about the opener, and then there was a squash with Yokozuna, and there was like a crappy competitive squash, with a boring one with Tatanka.
And we had that 5-minute segment with Todd Pettengill explaining to us what a tournament was.
And that's the key. The rest of this is filler event center crap. Like, event center is a cool segment to catch you up and recap and do something, or do a feature or do something, right?
Yeah.
But like the whole show, like the rest of the show was that stuff. Like,
you know what it felt like in some ways? And obviously the tag title match makes this more important than the show I'm about to reference, but it felt like that episode, that late stage WWE ECW episode we reviewed, where they had about 30 minutes, maybe 25 to 30 minutes of show, and then they had to pad it out with video packages.
Yes.
And a long preview of the upcoming Royal Rumble pay-per-view. That's what this was.
Yeah, nothing but just it felt like a ton of filler. Yeah,
It felt like a company that didn't feel like they had any competition and didn't feel any pressure at all to put on anything other than the tag title match of any noteworthiness whatsoever.
Favorite thing on this show?
That's a tough one. I mean, I guess I would say I feel weird not saying the tag title match because it was very good. For what it was, particularly for the standards of the WWF in this time. But I think just for sheer enjoyment, I would go with the Yokozuna squash match.
Yeah, no, I have very similar thoughts. I
think Fatu, in the nascent stages of being a very effective babyface as years would go by after this, that would be a close second.
Yeah, and I guess I enjoyed watching the people enjoy the title change.
Yes.
That felt like a big deal. That was very cool. Other than of course, the Yokozuna squash, which I highly enjoyed. So much northern exposure all over.
Oh yes, you can't ever not give something number one when it's so northern exposure heavy. Honorable mention to the guy in the Habs jersey behind Vince McMahon and Randy Savage on commentary. I greatly enjoyed that.
Worst thing on this show for you?
Oh, it's undoubtedly the Tatanka Derek Domino match. the 5-6 minutes of the middle of that match where Tatanka has no sense of urgency to finish off this complete loser of a professional wrestler, and then said complete loser of a professional wrestler gets sustained offense late in the match. This felt like something you'd be more likely to see on an AWA show, late stage, than something you should be seeing on Raw in 1994.
When you think about how could we make this boring squash more boring, have IRS do a promo, but not in person. Have him do it over the phone.
Yeah, not even an inset where we can see him looking wacky, but yes, just IRS on the phone, while what we're seeing on the screen is Tatanka with an arm bar for several minutes on Derek Domino.
So it's like, yeah, it's one of those, like, how could you make this any more boring? And IRS is like, hold my beer, I've got this. Yeah, this was, that's by far the worst thing on this show. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a podcast. For those of you, we asked a lot of questions on this show. I don't have a lot of experience in this time frame. So if you want to interact with the show, help us out, tell us about things, tell us about what you thought of the show, you can do that. Interact with us via Twitter at WrestleAtRandom. Instagram is the same thing. DMs are open. You can also do it publicly. If social media is not for you, that's awesome. You can send us an email, wrestlingatrandom@gmail.com. And we also have Facebook, facebook.com/wrestlingatrandom as well. And of course, the best way to support this show is to tell your friends about the show. If you can't support us financially, if you can, then we've got something for you. We offer bonus content over at our Patreon, patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom. There you get an extra bonus episode of this show every single week. So every Thursday, we're putting out new bonus content. Go sign up there to get an extra episode of this show in your feed.
And if you've never signed up before to the bonus feed, to the bonus content, boy, are you in for a treat, because not only will you get that week's bonus episode, that will unlock the entire back catalog of the bonus content, which, as we record this, we have basically a season and a half worth of episodes you've never heard of, well in excess of 40 full episodes there, and going every single week. And also, we should note that whenever we hit our next season break, as always, on the Patreon side, on the bonus content side, we just keep plowing through with new episodes, even when there is a lull on the free feed.
Yeah, and if going to patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom seems like a hassle, and you're an Apple Podcast subscriber, you can click the button to subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts, and that will also unlock the entire back catalog of bonus content right in your Apple Podcast feed, so you don't even have to go there. It's the same bonus content we're offering up at the Patreon, but you can subscribe directly from Apple Podcasts as well. And if you can't support us financially in these times, that's okay too. You can, like I mentioned, you can tell your wrestling fan friends about the show. You can tell your friends that used to be wrestling fans about the show. Have them take a trip down memory lane with us.
Yeah, or it might be a situation where you and your friend got out of wrestling, maybe around the same time that Jeremy did, and you want to find out why the hell was Chief Jay Strongbow and Afa and Lou Albano on Raw in 1994. This is the podcast to listen to.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for listening. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. This definitely fits again with the idea of Wrestling at Random. This is an episode of Monday Night Raw that I am fairly certain that if I lived for 300 more years, I would not have watched. But we got some enjoyment out of it, saw some wacky stuff, saw a tag title change of all things. So a worthwhile endeavor as always.
We're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.